Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the November edition of Molten Music Monthly. It may be rainy and wet and cold and generally pretty horrible at the moment, but the world of music technology, of synthesizers, software, technology, audio, pro stuff, in, out, sound generation and all that kind of jazz is bumping and buzzing. We're only a couple of days away from Black Friday, which will probably already be past by the time you see this, but of course there's tons of deals to be had and there's more gear than you could possibly imagine. So in some ways we live in a very dangerous time where anyone armed with a credit card could just wander off into some kind of urban environment and come back with boxes and boxes full of synthesizers and wonderfulness. But regardless, here are the things that perhaps you should be putting on your Christmas list this month. There's a nifty new bundle for your first row of Eurorack. MOTU release a couple of cool little interfaces. Elta puts 50 oscillators into a monster ambient synthesizer. Expressive E invents the most expressive expression of expressiveness ever. Steinberg adds some colour to the mixer in Cubase 10.5 and Padshop gets an upgrade. The Uno drum gets a whole bunch of new sounds from drum machines you've never heard of. TipTop Audio releases some keenly priced and keenly sized DSP modules. Instruo release their granulizer and tape recording modules. Analogue Solutions resurrects the Vostok, and Infradeep bring out a Polivoks from behind the Iron Curtain. South America produces yet another synthesizer with the Perceptron, and Union gives birth to the next generation of wavetable synthesizers. But first, how could we have forgotten them? You can't be sitting there going, but what? What about Behringer? Oh yes, November. November is definitely a month for Behringer. Well, it all started at the end of last month, really, with this crazy, weird, strange tease campaign that Behringer had kicked off, saying that it's 30 years since we started in this game and we've spent 30 years thinking about and considering and developing this, the biggest, most impressive, most awesome, most all-encompassing product that we've ever created in all our years of creating stuff. And it turns out it's a bit of a mixer. It's a lovely looking mixer. It's a very sci-fi looking mixer called Wing. And it incorporates analog in and out and also all sorts of digital ins and outs and strange ins and outs and networking ins and outs. It has a touchscreen interface and also a normal sort of interface. It looks fantastic, all sorts of DSP built in, all sorts of I/O and business, and they call it something like a personal mixing system. I mean, it's enormous thing. It's going to take up all this space on your desk, and they give the impression that it's something you're just going to carry around with yourself. Oh, who knows? I mean, it's the extension, it's the evolution, if you like, of the M32 and the X32 digital mixers, and it looks great. It looks great. It's not. I don't find it particularly interesting. I don't have the room for such things. But they spent a lot of time thinking about the tease campaign. You know, you can feel the amount of energy and groups and video making and all that kind of thing that went into releasing this thing where everybody sort of went, oh, that's nice. It was sort of the least exciting tease campaign there's ever been, and yet, as I say, it was massive, this thing. They thought about it. They had fingernails dragging across things, mysterious icons appearing, little glimpses of this and lights coming in and out. Yeah, it's a mixer, all right, we get it. It's awesome, no doubt, it's awesome. But that was just the beginning. I mean, before that had even really emerged as to what that was, because they did this extra cool thing, right, where they set a date, say we're going to release it on this day, and then they released it early. Oh, they're such a bunch of jokers. Anyway, while all that was going on, they had another little tease as well. They're having a little acid house party. Now, we've had a bit of that already with things like the MS-101 and the RD8, but this was different. This was true, pure acid. This was 303 acid. And so they released the TD3. It's a little 303 clone, and it's bang on, you know, like these things are. As in, it's in a little silver box, although there's a red one, there's a blue one, which is kind of interesting. But it sounds about right. It's got all those horrible little knobs that it's got, an horrible little keyboard that it's got. It's even got the fantastically horrible little sequencer, and all of the bits that everybody hates about the 303 are authentically cloned within the TD3. So that's brilliant. Well done. Well done. Actually, I've never had a problem with the 303. I've always enjoyed playing with them, whether it's a virtual one or a real one. They're good fun. People talk about the sequencer being really, really hard, but I don't know. You press a note and I don't know. Anyway, Behringer have authentically and lovingly created this homage to the TB303 bassline, and that's now out there. It's out there in the wild. You can go and buy yourself one and start making fantastic little acid tunes. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, you can marry it up with any of the drum machines that are knocking around at the moment and have a pretty wonderful time, I imagine. Trying to think of anything that they've added to it. I think they've added a distortion circuit, because a lot of people used to run it through Boss distortion pedals, and so Behringer thought, I know, let's take a Boss distortion pedal and just throw it straight, just stuff it straight in the side with a little knob. That'll do it. So there was all that. And while we were thinking about that, thinking about the mixer, thinking about the 303, they started another little tease about a wasp. Now, I had a look at this wasp. I had a look at it because they refer to it as a bee, as in, for some reason, Behringer, trying to use, I don't know. And so I was looking at this bee and I blew it all up to see whether it actually matched the picture of the wasp, which is on the wasp synthesizer. And it kind of did and it kind of didn't. I was thinking, well, maybe this is something else. But no, of course, it was all about the Wasp Deluxe, which they just released just like that. A lot less fanfare this time. As I say, a little bit of a tease, just a picture with a wasp on it saying, oh, look, you know, one other thing to show you. And they've stuck it into that increasingly annoying Eurorack form factor that they've been going with. What they did with the Model D, the Neutron, the Pro One, the Wasp fits into that. I mean, I guess perhaps if you're starting a collection, then you could have some kind of, you know, nice rack that has one of these in of each, or 6 of these if you want to go polychain. You know, you could have 16 of them in great big racks everywhere. I don't know. I mean, I remember when Behringer was talking about doing all these synthesizers, he asked a lot about whether people needed Eurorack compatibility, and people went, yeah, that'd be great, Eurorack compatibility. When I think what we really meant was that it would have compatible patch sockets, not that it had to actually drop into our rack, because these are big things and take up a lot of HP, and HP is expensive in Eurorack world. So I think having them in all of this form factor is a misstep, I think. I mean, with the Model D, the knobs are small, it's weeny, it's not a satisfying mini Moog experience. It's you know, it's something else. The sound is great, yeah, the sound is great, but the control experience is not awesome. And that's similar with the Neutron, similar with the Pro One, and now we have the Wasp. I mean, it looks good, of course it does. It has the same color scheme as the original. What the heck is it? Well, it's an old British synthesizer, funnily enough, that was renowned for its kind of gritty and unruly sound, and it was a very early digital oscillator. So it was generating sounds digitally, but the rest of it is analog. And Behringer have pretty much captured all of that and stuck it together. And from the demos that I've seen, it sounds gritty, it sounds gnarly, sounds pretty awesome. And of course they're hitting that sort of $300 price point, which is just fantastic. I mean, it's a great little synth. But back to what I was saying about the form factor. What I think they've missed here is that the Wasp, and the Wasp Deluxe in particular, had this great vibe, this look, this instrument look, and that's something which has been lacking in these Behringer products, because they all look about the same. They have different colors and stuff, but they all in this similar form factor, and so you've lost the opportunity to build an instrument. You've lost the opportunity to make something that's uniquely beautiful all by itself, and that's not something that you should throw away lightly, you know, because the look of something, the way that you are drawn into the workflow, the way it moves, the way the knobs are laid out, all of those things, those design decisions are hugely important and have a massive effect on how you can use something. The sound's always going to be great. You know, the sound is great. I'm not worried about whether it's authentic or whether it sounds exactly like it should. It's a synthesizer. It will sound great, guarantee it. But what then becomes more interesting is how you work it, how that runs, how it sits on your desk, how it looks in your setup, whether it complements what you're doing. You know, these kind of visual and aesthetic things are, I believe, important to how you approach an instrument, how you approach playing something. That's why you want a guitar that looks nice. You don't just want a guitar that sounds nice. And I feel the same way about synthesizers. I mean, they've done great things like the MS-101. Perfect. It looks like the SH-101 did. It's a big, chunky plastic synthesizer. It's exactly what it's supposed to be. The RD8, similar. Nice, big, fat thing. Lots of room. You know what you're doing. Bosh. Behringer did this right with the Odyssey. You know, great. It looks right. You know, the layout is there and everything reflects that instrument experience. And they've missed out on an opportunity to do that with the Wasp and the Pro 1 and the Neutron and the Model D. However, the biggest news is, of course, the Poly D. The Poly D. Now, I've never seen something cause such consternation on the internet quite so quickly, certainly in the world of synthesizers. It's just been brilliant. It's been fascinating to watch. People going out of their minds, either for the fact that there's a polyphonic Minimoog clone thing from Behringer, but also about the nature of polyphony, and that's been extraordinary. Oh my word. But okay, in a nutshell, the Poly D is a 4-note polyphonic Minimoog. So they've taken their Model D, they've taken everything they've learned about the Model D, and they've added an oscillator and opened up those oscillators to individual playing, making it polyphonic. Polyphonic meaning more than one note. And the brilliant thing about this Poly D is that it looks like a flipping instrument. It looks like the Minimoog, and it looks like kind of what the Model D should have always been. So rather than this squat little Eurorack compatible thing, it's a proper synthesizer with a proper turn-up thing, large knobs. It just looks fantastic. It looks like a Minimoog. And the fact that it can play more than one note at a time is a massive, massive bonus. It's a polysynth. It's an analog polysynth. Now, of course, I absolutely have to comment on the nature of polyphony, because everyone is just up in arms. No, not everyone. Most people are just chilled. It's just a polysynth, man. Let's just not get too out of control here, because there's these two terms. There's polyphony and there's paraphony, or paraphonic. Polyphonic, paraphonic. What does it mean? Does anyone care? Yeah, I mean, it's important, right? It's important because it speaks about how the signal chain works within a synthesizer and what that synthesizer is actually capable of. Now, it's important to separate these two terms because they aren't actually related. They're about two different things. Polyphony is about how many notes can it play at one time with your fingers. Can it play one note? It's monophonic. Can it play two notes? It's duophonic. Can it play more than that? We call it polyphonic. You know, duophonic is also polyphonic. Does that matter? No, not really. It's just a way of describing things, an accepted way of describing things. Now, what happens after those notes are triggered is a matter of articulation. So, a polyphonic synthesizer can have those voices articulated in different ways. It can go through a single filter and VCA and envelope, or it can go through multiple ones, one for each voice. And if you have one for each voice, that is a fully articulated polyphonic synthesizer. If you have a single filter and amplifier envelope, it's called a paraphonic articulation. So it's a polyphonic synthesizer with paraphonic articulation. Those are the facts. Now, it gets misused and misunderstood and thrown around in all sorts of different ways, and I don't really think it matters. What's important is that you understand that the Poly D will play 4 notes, which is great, but it only has a single filter and single envelope. So if you press one note with a long attack, the note will come in. Any other notes that you press in order to include an accord will come in instantly because the one envelope is going on. Yeah? The one envelope. Now that's the downside of paraphonic articulation in a polyphonic synthesizer. Oh, don't we love these terms? They're so wonderfully meaty, these terms. So that's the downside. You can play your chords, you can play your pads, you can play more than one note, but the envelope will get triggered by the first note or get triggered the next time you release if you're not playing legato. Those are the considerations you have to think about. If you have something which is fully articulated, then every single note you press has its own envelope. So you press something, that comes in, the next note you press, that starts coming in, and so on. And it's the same for the filter. So the playing experience you get with a Poly D is going to be slightly odd when compared to something like, oh, I know, the Minilogue or the Summit or any of these other big polyphonic synthesizers. However, this paraphonic articulation is exactly the same as what you find in the Moog Matriarch. It's the same as what you find in the Arturia Microfreak. It's a common thing that we discover, so there's no need to go crazy about it. And Behringer calling it a Poly D, yeah, that's okay. That's factual. That's what it is. And I think that suits it really, really well. You are welcome, of course, absolutely welcome, to argue the toss about polyphony in the comments down the bottom. Why not? Absolutely. You can say it's not polyphonic, it's paraphonic. Do so. That's fine. That's fine. But, you know, my view and the view of many, perhaps, is that polyphony and paraphony are two actually different things describing different parts of synthesizer architecture. Yeah. Oh, and just to finish off the Poly D, they added the distortion again from that Boss pedal, and they added some chorus, a Juno 60 of all places, and they stuck in a sequencer and an arpeggiator. I can't quite decide whether it's something that I would like, the Poly D. Because, I mean, all the sounds that it's made have been very basic, brassy, synthy sounds. Whereas, I don't know, do I like that? I don't know. I kind of like big polyphonic sounds. I like the sounds of the Prologue. I like the sounds of the Summit. I like the sounds of the Moog 1. That kind of thing. I don't know whether just those 4 voices of those 4 oscillators is really the kind of thing that I'm after. It does look nice though. I don't know. Somebody send me one and I'll make a decision on it. Now, I saw this at Synthfest, but I wasn't really allowed to talk about it last time I did one of these videos, so we can talk about it now. Create Audio has released something called the Nifty bundle, or the Nifty case, or the Nifty, I don't know, it's called Nifty anyway, because it kind of is. And what it is, in a nutshell, is a Nifty case for your Eurorack. It's a single row of Eurorack casing that comes with an integrated power supply and a couple of modules. Now, what's great about this is that it contains everything you need to get started in Eurorack. It's not bad looking, it's 84 HP, it's got a built-in power supply, it has MIDI connections in and out, a couple of CV connections at the top to move things around, and so you can put your first modules in and have it working. It even has an audio output and a headphone output, so you're not having to worry about including an output module, because those little things are all built in, and that's genius, and is the sort of thing I've been waiting for ages. Ever since I started this journey, there has been this huge hole for someone to throw in a case for 100, 200 quid, you know, for not too much money, that does all of that first bit of hard work of trying to work out what your case should be and what your power supply should be. 84 HP, built-in power supply, it's got MIDI in and out, it's got audio in and out, all ready to go. All it needs is some modules. And actually, in this Nifty bundle, they've added a couple of actually quite interesting, slightly strange little digital modules. The 2 modules are from Twisted Electrons, and they consist of a little sort of hexagon controller / sequencer and a digital little chiptune module. So you have a way of generating sound and a way of triggering that generated sound, all built in and ready to go in the Nifty bundle. It's awesome. It's great. I mean, they're not bad little things, and it's a great place to start. So you've got your case, you've got your MIDI, you've got your audio coming out, and you've got a couple of modules that make sound. You can get started. How much is this thing? My understanding is that it's about $269 for the lot. For everything. For all of it. You can get the case for about $200, or the modules individually for about $99 each. But as a bundle together, as a price thing, it's awesome. So what, 200 to 250 quid? And you've got a workable case power supply solution. I mean, you're going to spend that easily on just getting one of these and the power supply, easily 250 quid. You know, even if you get the Behringer case, the power supply is still a lot of money. The Happy Ending kit, for instance, from TipTop Audio, which is one of the other entry-level ways into Eurorack, you know, those are still, I don't know, 150 quid. So for a bit more, you can get a much better case, more room for stuff, a couple of decent, interesting, quirky modules. You've got MIDI connections, audio connections. There's a hell of a lot of value baked in to this one particular thing. I haven't had a go on one yet. I was hoping to have one to review, but I haven't seen it as yet. But as soon as one becomes available, I think I might jump on it and see how it does. I've also been thinking about sort of putting together a loaner unit, filling up a row of Eurorack to then send out to patrons and to other interested people who want to try out Eurorack and then share it around and move it around the place. And something like the Create Audio Nifty bundle, that case in of itself, is perhaps a reasonable way of doing that, because it has such useful things built into it and it's inexpensive and it will come in a box with its own padding, you know, and so could survive potentially being couriered around the place. So yeah, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to trying that out. The MOTU M2 and M4 audio interfaces are USB-C interfaces, little ones, in that annoying kind of 1U half rack form factor. But other than that, they look pretty cool. I'm loving the display on the front, and they give you, as you expect, 2 in-out or 4 in-out, but over USB-C, which hopefully could be faster, meaning lower latency. But MOTU have always been good for low latency, so I have every confidence that these are going to follow the same vein. It's good to see MOTU doing something smaller, because most of their stuff is big, huge, expensive, chunky stuff. So something of their pedigree in a smaller, more budget-conscious form, I think it's got to be a good thing. According to MOTU, it has the same converters inside as their big stuff, but otherwise it's just what you expect from a USB audio interface. It does have MIDI in and out on physical ports on the back, which is good to see. And they are both bus powered. I'm not going to sit here and try to think up new things to say about it. Audio interfaces from MOTU, the M2 and the M4, look pretty good. Check them out. Don't know a huge amount about this, but from Elta comes the Solar 50. It's a big desktop silver box packed full of 50 oscillators. Seem to be arranged into groups of 5 oscillators per voice for 10 voices, which is an odd number for some reason. Feels like an odd number. It uses the patch wire system for patching, so every voice has got a little bank of tiny weeny holes that you put tiny weeny wires in order to patch it through in signal routing and also modulation. There's a big chunky DSP engine for adding masses of reverbs and delays and bits like that, and it seems to be the kind of synthesizer that you set going and then you start dialing in things and changes and bits and pieces, rather than something that you play, although it does have its own touch plate controller at the front end, sort of a strange sci-fi Logan's Run type of interface. Ooh, you can imagine, you can just by looking at it, you can imagine the sort of sounds that it can make. It certainly looks very impressive and sounds interesting as well. Check out the videos on it. It's just an amazing amount of sonicness and texture and movement and modulation coming off it. Yeah, quite a thing. Look out for that, the Solar 50. Now, Expressive E have a new, well, you can't really call it a MIDI controller, can you? I mean, that seems to undervalue it somehow. But Expressive E, the people who gave us the wobbly block touche thingy, apparently have been working on this for a couple of thousand years. And what it is an actual keyboard that's augmented with a fabulous amount of expressive control. The point of this, the thing that this has that really changes the game, is the fact that it's a proper playable keyboard. Because previously, when you're looking at expressive keyboards, so we're talking about MPE, we're talking about the ability to do pitch bends per note and modulation per note and aftertouch and pressure and all those kinds of articulations. Those are great, but up until this point, in order to do it, you've had to radically change the interface. So you've got things like the C-board from Roly, which is this great massive spongy cake thing that you're pushing and digging yourself into, and it's not actually a mechanical keyboard at all. Or you look at something like the Keith Macmillan, whatever it's called, something keyboard, and that again looks like a piano keyboard, but the keys don't move, you've just got rubber stuff on them. Whereas what you have here is a mechanical keyboard that somehow manages to capture expressive playing as well. So you can do vibrato, you can push into it, you can dig into it to do aftertouch and polyphonic aftertouch, as well as pressure, as well as pitch, bend and change on every little tiny little thing. It's very, very interesting. It looks remarkable. It has a particular really interesting style to it, and everybody that I've heard who's played on it, and I know quite a few people who have had their hands on it, just think it's the greatest thing ever. I mean, I'm kind of an MPE skeptic, I suppose, in as much as, you know, when MPE started coming along, you kind of imagine that all music everywhere would go all warbly and wobbly because everyone's trying to do all this expressive play, and actually it didn't really happen. And for the majority of us, for the majority of the time, we're just still sequencing and playing as we always have. And I remain sort of unconvinced that things like MPE and MIDI 2.0 and all that support for it has really had the impact that the industry kind of wants it to. Because it's like, well, so not only have I got to think up what I'm going to play, I've got to think up how I'm going to push into it and move it about. You know, it also almost becomes too much to cope with. However, that aside, this thing called the Osmose looks just to be a fabulously inviting and engaging expressive experience. The other thing about it is they've been working with Hacken Audio. Now, Hacken Audio produced the Continuum, which is their own spongy keyboard-esque thing, but again not mechanical, but their own expressive controller. But the one thing that Hacken did was build in this quite extraordinary synthesizer engine that responds to all of these different parameters. And so Expressive E have got on board with Hacken Audio in order to put that engine inside the Osmose so that it becomes an instrument. It's not just a controller. It can, of course, be an MPE controller, but it is far more than that because it is an instrument in of itself. And I think that makes a huge difference. So yeah, we're probably not going to see it till next summer, and the price is relatively high, as one would imagine for such a premium looking instrument. But yeah, looking forward to seeing and hearing and hopefully having a go myself at some point. Cubase 10.5. Oh, how exciting these incremental updates that DAW manufacturers give us. It's like saying we haven't quite got enough for a whole new version, but we've got a few bits and pieces that you think you might be interested that we're starting to put in now rather than wait until later. Yeah, so what have they got? You can now colorize the mixer. Oh yes, each channel can have its own sort of color, like most other DAWs. So that's exciting. But there's more to it than that. They've also put in a few other bits and pieces, like video export. Now this is quite interesting. A lot of people do sound to picture, and Cubase has never had the ability to export a finished product. You have to export your audio and then put it into another piece of software in order to match it up with the video. But now, once you've written your score for your video, which is running within Cubase, you can now export the entire lot as a complete video with audio. Awesome. So that's great. Another thing you can do, you now import tracks from another project into your current project, which is interesting. There's a couple of new plugins. There's some kind of spectral EQ and a multi-tap delay. And the other big thing is retrospective MIDI recording. So this is essentially taking the Ableton Live idea that all this MIDI is going on, so why don't you just record it in the background so that if you find you've done something interesting and yet you didn't actually put it into record, you can dig those notes out and find them. So Steinberg thought, yeah, let's do that. So Cubase now is monitoring the MIDI all the time, and you can, I'm not entirely sure how, I haven't looked at it myself, but you can pull out stuff that you were playing even though you weren't in record, which is cool. I think that's very, very cool. Now, the other thing Steinberg has done is to upgrade Padshop. It's now Padshop 2. And within this, they've brought in an entirely new sound engine to crash into the existing sound engine. So along with the granulizing sound engine, you now have a spectral sound engine. Now, a spectral oscillator brings in the idea of playing samples at any time, in any place, in any way, in any direction, all at once, whenever you like. And you can push the character and the tonal qualities of the sound around with knobs labelled things like purity and inharmonicity and inharmonicity. They've built in a load of movement with arpeggiators and modulation and just pushed the possibilities of Padshop all over the place. I mean, it's still a great place for pads. That's why I quite like it. I like and enjoy a good pad. But with this spectral bit, you've now got far more tonal colours that are going on in there, and it can do a much broader range of sounds, making it Padshop Plus, if you like. DSP effects in Eurorack modular tend to be on the expensive side. Expensive and really wide. Massive, these things. At least usually. However, TipTop Audio, who are guilty of producing very wide and expensive DSP-based effects modules, have decided in their wisdom to produce 3 kind of cool, kind of small, and not badly priced effects modules. They look like they kind of came off the production line together. There's the Z-Verb, the Echoes, and the Z5000. Z5000 apparently is a module they used to do many years ago, and this is kind of the reimagining of that, although the old architecture and all those bits and pieces are completely different. But hey, let's call it the Z5000 anyway. But what you have is the same layout of these modules with the 3 buttons at the top, and then 2 channels of knobs and a couple of patch CV points here and there. So I guess the economies of scale are helping it to keep the price under control, and essentially you've got different DSP engines in each of these modules doing a very similar thing. The Z-Verb is very cool. It has 24 algorithms in there. The 3 buttons at the top give you sounds of the 70s, 80s and 90s, I think. Yeah, something like that. So different flavours of reverb from different places. You've then got knobs that change all the things you expect it to change, and some CV control over those. The next one is called Echoes, and it's got a whole bunch of delays inside. The 3 buttons now give you access to tape delays, digital delays, or pitch delays. And there's, again, 24 algorithms, and an enormous amount of fun will ensue in there. The final module, the Z5000, is kind of a multi-effects unit, and it takes the best of the reverbs, the best of the delays, the best of some other modulations, and sticks those together in a box for you. Now, there's a couple of key things, I suppose. They all have stereo outputs, but they don't have stereo inputs. They're all mono, and also there's no sync, because behind the scenes there's a very clever audio DSP clocking going on, kind of a crash between audio rate oscillator and a digital DSP system, which gives it this imprecise and imperfect flavour. It gives it character. It gives it the ability to vary and deviate, which otherwise it would be an extremely clean and clinical experience. But because of that strange synchronization that's going on, it can't accept a clock sync, so you can't clock the delay, for instance, to the rest of your system. I mean, obviously you could dial in whatever time you like, you just can't send it a clock to make that happen. So is the deviation, is the strangeness of it worth it? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's all about character, isn't it? After all, I mean, you know, timing is never something that you want to feel too precious about when doing Eurorack, I would say. But all 3 of these are $199 each. They do it with the horrible front panel with the green stuff that TipTop like, or they do it with a nice black panel now as well, which I have to say is much, much better. Now, Instruo have come back again to make me look foolish in my terrible pronunciations of their modules, but the ones that we saw at Superbooth, you know, the granulizer one and also the one with the tape things, well, both of those, they're now available. Hurrah! So you can go out and get your own one. So, what was it about? Oh, I don't know that I remember. One of them was a granulizer, this fabulous wave thing that goes across it that you can scrub and scan and do interesting thing with. I think it was up to 6 seconds of recording time into there. You record into it, you swipe it, you granulize and do all those sorts of things all over it and inject it through your Eurorack. There's no saving, there's no presets, there's no nothing. You record on the fly and go with it. And I love that. It's called probably the Arbahr. The Arbahr. And the other one is called the Lubadh. And it looks like a tape machine. It's like a recording tape machine thing. And you can record acres of sound into that and use it as a loop on loop, or something which returns background sound to you. You can mess about with 2 decks separately or together, one on top of the other, and really enjoy the degradation of the sound and the way that goes. And again, you're not loading up samples, you're not loading up or saving anything, you're recording into it and using it within the experience of your Eurorack. And that really, I think that's really interesting and really brave. I think that's an awesome approach to push you into creative thinking when using your Eurorack. Both of them look beautiful. They look like bits of steampunk technology. They're both very, very modulatable and integratable within your Eurorack. You can stuff stuff in everywhere and everything coming out all over the place. It's real time, it's on the fly, it's flying by the seat of your pants type of beautiful modules that are sadly far too expensive for me to probably ever have anything to do with them. But I would love to have a play with this stuff. Maybe one day, we shall see. So while we're still reeling from the colossus that Analogue Solutions brought along to the Synth Fest that can't really work out what you're supposed to do with, they've sort of introduced a mini one called the Vostok. Now, they had a Vostok 20 years ago. One of their earlier synthesizers was called the Vostok, and this is kind of a reimagining of that, bringing back the pin matrix that it had, because everyone loved that on the Colossus. Thought, oh wow, a pin matrix, yeah, that's a bit like the Synthy, isn't it? Oh wow, a bit like the Putney. Oh, we love that. Do we love that? I don't know. I mean, it's a method of patching that avoids having to have patch cables everywhere, except I quite like having patch cables everywhere because I like following them around to see what it is I'm supposed to be doing. Whereas a little pin matrix, I want the LFO to go to that and I have to know what it's called and know what I want it to do a little bit more. And is that good? I don't know. I mean, obviously it appeals to a great number of people. I'm just not entirely sure. Is that? I don't know. I've never actually had a synthesizer with a pin matrix, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to give an impression of something. So what is this Vostok 2020? Well, it's some kind of synthesizer, isn't it? So it's another one from Analogue Solutions. It's in a nice upright thing. It looks fantastic. Black front panel with this orange and white writing. It's very much giving a bit of a Soviet vibe out. I don't know whether that's, well, obviously that's intentional, but I don't know what that's trying to say as such. But it's a 3 oscillator mono synth where everything has been revealed as a patch point, so you can patch in, out, through, and then use a mod matrix to patch everything back into itself. I imagine there's a lot of movement in the sound of this thing. Well, it's looking very cool, certainly. It's got a CV sequencer and a MIDI sequencer. It's that kind of thing that Analogue Solutions like to do. They like to pack in some slightly different things to give it a different feel depending on how you're using it. Other key features are things like a joystick controller and a lovely meter, little signal meter at the top. However, this thing's going to cost over £3,000, which seems a lot for a mono synth. I mean, it just seems a lot. And I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. I mean, I don't doubt that this is a fabulously built Analogue Solutions synthesizer, but they've built other fabulous things for much less money and much more money. So who knows? But at the moment, there's no real demo videos or anything that I've seen as yet. And so I haven't really got to grips with exactly what it is that this is offering. There's always talk of Polivoks synthesizers, that great big Soviet thing with the Soviet writing, Russian writing all over it, that looks like something out of a computer game. It probably is something out of a computer game, but they crop up. Oh, there's a Polivoks clone, or there's this Polivoks clone, but you never ever, I don't seem to actually come across them. Where do they hang out? Do they ever appear in shops? I'm not sure. There was another one by a company called Nova, I think it was, called the Polymorph a while ago. Now that has re-emerged as a company called Infradeep, and they've got a slightly less inspired name of the PVX-800, and this is the same thing. It's another Polivoks idea coming out of Russia, coming out of some electronics workshop in deepest darkest. No, I don't actually have any idea, but it looks great. I just wonder whether it's actually going to make it somewhere to a place where you could try it out. But the PVX-800 is a duophonic synthesizer based all on that old Soviet electronics and made actually in Siberia. They've ironed out some of the trouble, like the warm-up, the instability, the crappy oscillators, the fact that it caught fire, would blow up, or that it would go and run off and inform the authorities about anything naughty that you did. All those sorts of things have been stripped out, so it's a decent, stable, but retains the gritty character of that filter and the architecture to offer up this wonderful Cold War-esque sort of sound quality. They're selling it direct for about $580, which doesn't seem too much, provided you can get it here in one piece. And it's one of those things that I'd really like to have a go of, just to satisfy my own curiosity about what these things are all about. Seems to be a lot of synthesizer action in South America at the moment. The latest one is from Peru, from a company called AtomoSynth, and they have released a Perceptron. All interesting names, I think, to get your tongue around. This is a desktop synthesizer that has a really nicely, clearly laid out kind of workflow and a whole load of patching at the bottom. What's nice about it in many ways is simply that they've made it big, which seems odd, but in Eurorack it tends to be sometimes too small, overly small, and when other synthesizers try to fit into that framework, it can make for a fiddly experience. Whereas this, it's only a mono synth, but it's on quite a large setup with lots of space between the knobs. You can see what you're doing, you can see how things flow through each other, and the patch sockets are kept out of the way, which I don't always like, but in this particular situation that seems to work really well because it helps with the clarity of the entire thing. You could definitely see it as a bit of an experimental synthesizer with all those patch points and the way things flow into each other. It's got things like loopable envelopes, multi-mode filters, and a lot of random control voltage generation, which is always welcome. And you know, I always love a product that bigs itself up as being the next generation, the biggest thing, the most extraordinary, groundbreaking, game-changing thing ever you've ever come across. I love all that. I lap it up. The latest one for that is the Union. It's a wavetable synthesizer, but it's not a wavetable synthesizer the likes of which you have never seen. It has more wavetables than anything wavy that's ever been waved at a table ever. But actually there is something in here that's quite interesting because the oscillators themselves aren't actually wavetables. They are regular analog style oscillators. I mean, this is a piece of software, so virtual analog if you like. And what it does is that you take these two oscillators and you crash them together and you take wavetables from the resultant waveforms that are formed from when they crash together. So it's kind of sort of a self-sampling wavetable generating synthesizer, and that, all right, that's quite interesting. But at the same time, the first two oscillators remain what they are, so you can mix those back in as they are, and it's this third wavetable oscillator that's been generated from these other two oscillators that you can then mix that back in this multi-threaded generating feedback loop type thing. Well, it's an interesting idea. It's quite an interesting idea. I quite like it. Yeah, I think you should go with it. After that, you have all the usual enveloping and filtering stuff, and then a shed load of effects. More effects than you could poke a stick at if you had a stick to poke effects with. Phasers and reverbs and delays and stuff. So this huge sound, 32 voices coming off the oscillators, this crashed in wavetable thing going on, filtering, effects, the whole lot. So there you go, Union, game-changing wavetable thing. Well, I think that's certainly worth a listen anyway, because there could be something interesting in there. It could be, because so often when you're given a wavetable, you're given a whole bunch of wavetables. Here you go, here's a wavetable synth and here's a bunch of waves. So I like the idea that you can generate your own in such a simple and easy way without having to really think about it or draw them in or having to come up with some kind of clever way of generating something. You can just do it on the fly just by filling with oscillators. Yeah, nice idea. So yeah, that I think will do it. That will do it. So, where are we? What's going on? Well, who knows? But one thing's for certain. This Sunday, 8 o'clock GMT, Sunday night, I'm going to be having another live stream. Let's get together. Let's chat about all this Behringer nonsense. Let's argue over polyphony. That'll be awesome. Come along and do that. We'll talk about stuff. Might play a bit of music. Don't know what on. I'm going to just point at things randomly. I'm going to make some music on this thing. And we'll get together, have a beer, bring your kids, we'll chill out and have a lovely time talking about music technology, synthesizers and stuff. So that's this Sunday, 8 o'clock. Just thinking now, it's going to clash with War of the Worlds. Well, I just have to watch it on demand like modern people do. So yeah, that'll be cool. Let's do that. Otherwise, coming up, I've got more stuff on the audio PC. I'm going to be doing the BIOS video and the installing Windows video very soon. Going to get straight onto that. Got more to do on the Surface, obviously. A lot more to do on the Surface Pro 7, so I've got more of that coming along. I want to do something on the Bloom and the Lifeforms and more on the Compass. And of course, there's more building to be done on the Descartes Dream. So I have tons Tons and tons to do, lots of stuff to come, always new things in the channel. You never know quite exactly what it is that's going to come along next, because I just have this scattergun approach. I'm going to do something on the new tech. No, I'm going to, drum. Oh, no, I'm going to do something on this. So who knows? Who knows what happens next? It's an exciting time, very exciting time. So yeah, don't forget to join me on Sunday. And if you like what I do, if you like these videos and you'd like to help out, then do consider coming along to Patreon and throw me a couple of dollars so that I can continue to fund this madness, this journey, this adventure into sound that we are all on. We're all on together. We are most definitely all on this together. Yeah, so great. Looking forward to seeing you on Sunday. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.